Now, at this point, one has to ask how an asylum seeker who isn't even able to speak the language of the host country can possibly make an informed decision about who to vote for.
They translate it.
I couldn't.
Yes, and it's always the uninformed now will always be uninformed. It's not like they could, I don't know, learn a little bit. They could inform themselves. But to this person, it's not about to this guy Ben. It's not about that like any Slovenian, as an example, could ever learn Irish politics. It's that he doesn't want them involved in Irish politics. Grip media, more like gripe media, am I right? Let's see. Tip of the iceberg regarding, oh my god, Sound of Freedom. Yeah, he's just like an American. Yeah. Message from the editor, don't care. Irish minister, definition of woman is not relevant. That film, yeah, really. Let's see. Can't answer a simple question. Irish minister pressed on misinformation. Can I get, what is this? The Irish government is acting like citizenship doesn't matter. Imported voters. What is this?
The Irish government helping asylum seekers to vote in elections is a self-serving power grab disguised as a good deed. This is Ben Scallan, and you're watching Gripped Media.
Oh boy. Jeez. You know, not that I have a lot of room to talk, but someone's looking a bit more full these days, 4 years later.
Yeah. Before we start the video, please consider signing.
Nope, shut up. Don't do that. Don't do any of that ever.
The people have failed. We must elect a new people. And this is a sentiment which the Irish government seems to have taken very much to heart. Last week, it was revealed that the Irish state is issuing guides in foreign languages, including in Ukrainian, to inform asylum seekers how to vote in the local elections next year. Cool. As reported by the Irish Times, Ukrainian language guide to Irish local elections published. Ukrainian language.
Wait a minute. So Ukrainian refugees coming into the country, and the local governments or whoever has decided, well, they're going to be living here, we might as well give them some kind of voice in our elections. What, like, I would love to hear the rebuttal of like, well, they shouldn't be allowed to. It's like, well, if they're living here now, why shouldn't they? Oh, because they're not from here, possibly? Like, that's kind of the obvious, like, they're not from here, they shouldn't get to vote, which that they live here, meaning they're part of this society, part of these communities. They should probably have some kind of say in them, right? But I'm assuming this is some of that good old-fashioned replacement rhetoric that's very popular here in the United States for white people. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming this person probably doesn't see Ukrainians, or maybe, like, again, since it might be Irish nationalism, it's like one of those, they're not Irish, they shouldn't get to vote. But again, that's just if you're like, by that logic, then no immigrant should be allowed to vote.
Guides on local elections in Ireland and getting on the electoral register have been published as the number of potential eligible voters among refugees from Ukraine tops 55,500.
Wait, that's it? Wait, what's the population of Ireland? I'm sorry. Ireland population. Jamaican, what the fuck? A population of 5 million, and we're worried about, go back to that. We're worried about potentially 55, not even 60,000? What? Spread across the entire nation of 50 million? Fucking spare me. God.
Ireland and getting on the electoral register.
Is that like 10 to 15% like in total is of the immigration population?
Have been published as the number of potential eligible voters among refugees from Ukraine tops 55,500. The next local election is due to take place next June, and the guide explains how every person over the age of 18 is entitled to register to vote in the area.
Due to take place next June, the guide explains how every person over the age of 18 is entitled. Wait, what? But that's wait. Is the bar for election that you're 18? That's it? It's just you're 18. You have 10% of the total population immigrant. Okay, and yeah, and like this specific group is probably not even close to like. I'd love to know what percentage of that group is like is the Ukrainian people he's talking about. Dublin this is shit. Oh, okay. Next local election is due to take place next year. But yeah, wait a minute. As long as you're 18, then you can just register to vote. That sounds like freedom, baby. What's the problem here? This sounds like democracy.
Where they ordinarily live to elect county and city councillors. Some 91,464 people from Ukraine have fled to Ireland in the wake of Russia's war on their country as of last weekend. Of these, 55,567 are aged 18 and over and will be eligible to vote if they stayed in Ireland and registered in advance of polling day, which will be on an as yet undecided date between June 6th and June 9th, 2024. The Department of Housing has also published...
So let's be clear. There are Ukrainian refugees moving to the country, and as long as they register before voting day, then they're allowed to vote. So what's the problem? What's bad about that? I think that's really good. As someone who likes democracy, again, I think that's pretty fucking based. Like, hey, you've relocated here because you're coming from a literally like war-torn country now. Yeah, you're as long as you're 18, as long as you pass that eligibility bar of turning 18 in our country, you should have a voice in it. You're going to be staying here. And sentiment came about when Ukrainian refugees, Irish people on housing list, and we have a big housing crisis. I mean, but that's one of those cases, isn't it? Like, I can totally understand that, but wouldn't that also be like these people are fleeing an entire nation? I would suppose that if to the extent that there is a housing crisis, there are people in Ireland who live with their parents, who live with family. So it's like those people have somewhere to go. These people don't have connections. It is housing or nothing for them. So yeah, that kind of makes sense to me, but also that would be the case where like you want to put pressure on your government to, I don't know, maybe like fix the housing crisis problem. Like the problem isn't, oh, there are some immigrants who get housing. The problem is you didn't build enough housing. Like the housing crisis did not suddenly appear when immigrants showed up. It had been there already. It's kind of the same here in the US. Our housing crisis is fucking astonishingly bad. But so it's fair in housing policy rather than, yeah, exactly. Like a failure in immigration policy is that like you didn't build up your housing ahead of time. It's poor planning before, not poor planning after.
Guides in Arabic, Romanian, Polish, Russian, Chinese, and many more languages. Cool. Though it may come as a surprise to many people.
God forbid somebody speak one of those languages while in Ireland to this guy.
This has actually been a policy in Ireland for years, believe it or not. Anyone ordinarily living in Ireland can vote in local elections whether or not they're a citizen. Refugees were given the right to vote in Irish local elections in 2004. In fact...
2004? Jesus, this is incredibly base, by the way. But, yeah, it seems like you're a bit late to the train, buddy. Ireland already solved the democracy problem. A thriving democracy, if I've ever seen one. Yeah, no, like, what's funny to me is like, yeah, this has been like this since 2004. So what's the problem now?
Non-nationals can even run for election if an asylum seeker wanted to.
Yeah, didn't Ireland? Okay, again, this is because I watched Dairy Girls recently. Didn't Ireland also take in Ukrainian refugees back in the 90s and stuff? Like that was like a whole episode of that show. Like that was like a whole, wasn't that already like a thing? Like this doesn't feel like anything new, really.
Run for the locals next year, they'd be perfectly entitled to do so legally, provided they're over the age of 18. But while this policy is not new, this upcoming election will be unique due to the unprecedented number of asylum seekers the government has parachuted
Northern Ireland,
into
so
the
it might
country
be
in the
different.
last year.
Yeah, that's true.
There are now far more alleged refugees arriving into Ireland than we would have seen previously, with a much bigger potential to sway the vote. The government's own civil servants expect 180,000 refugees to be here by the end of the year. Now, at this point, one has to
Again,
ask,
I'm just lucky that I watched that show recently, and I know that. But again, I'm so what's it called, bereft of an understanding of Irish politics.
how an asylum seeker
Sadly.
who isn't even able to speak the language of the host country
This is all
can
new
possibly
information.
make an informed decision about who to vote for? Is there
Whoa. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that democracy and eligibility to voting require you to be knowledgeable of anything. I thought democracy was all about giving people a decision to lead their own, to actually make decisions in their society and in their country, not gatekeep that behind, I don't know, poll tests, behind, like this sort of nonsense, this sort of talk of like, oh, well, they only like moved here. Do they really know anything? Are they really familiar with the issues? I don't know. Maybe they met an Irishman and they had a conversation about it. Like, this isn't how democracy works. You either take everybody or nobody. That is not how this works at all. Like, this nonsense talking point of like, oh, well, do they really know, are they really aware, or do they even know anything? Do they know the culture? No, all that is bullshit. That is just the same. In America, we had a version of that. It was called poll testing in the South. And it was just a way for white racists to disenfranchise black people by being like, look, they're not smart enough to know what they're voting on, so they shouldn't be allowed to vote. Like, no, it's fucking bullshit. All that is anti-democratic sentiment.
vote not uninformed almost by definition? For example, I don't speak.
Okay, random question. Ask many Americans. Opinion of the IRA. I don't know enough. I genuinely don't. There's like a part of like, I any answer I give, yay or nay, I just don't have enough awareness. I really don't. Like, so many Americans are like, love the IRA. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Like, I know the IRA is in strong opposition to the crown, right? Yeah. Which base, that's cool. I like that. I like opposition to imperialism, but that is, and like, obviously bombings, shit like that. But I don't know. I like, any answer I give would be an incredibly misinformed one. So I don't want to really give one. I don't want to say yay or nay because I just don't know enough. I would have to really read up on it. Originally IRA based, then turned into terrorist organization. Yeah, and that's what I've also heard. But that's one of those things where coming from the United States, you can't always trust our categorization of terror organizations, unfortunately. I was born in 92, so I distinctly remember how how kind of different the IRA, or at the very least like the way terror organization was used pre 9/11 and how it was used after in American politics and in American just in America in general. And like, after 9/11, God, like, everything got turned into terror organizations. And like, some of it I'm sure was justified, but I also have no doubt that a lot of it wasn't, or at the very least some of it wasn't. So it's just, yeah. Americans seem to have the vision of liberation against the Brits sort of thing and forget about the whole bombing thing. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Those are like the two things I know, is that it's liberation against the Brits, and they committed like public bombings that led to the death of civilians. So it's kind of like, right. I can't, like I said, I'd have to learn more. I would have to learn more.
One word of Slovenian.
We don't sadly learn, at least here in the United States, our international history is not great. Like, you get there's a lot of emphasis on World War II. I remember, like, a lot of emphasis on World War II, and a lot of emphasis on like U.S. history, obviously. But like, world history, I feel like I got a better education on like world history from like, you know, ye oldie days, like, you know, medieval times type shit. Like I feel like we got a better history on that, or at least I did, than more modern stuff. The more modern stuff, I like, it might have just been the teacher, because I really like my World History 1 teacher, not as much my World History 2 teacher. And again, a lot of World History 2, or at least like whatever is more modern history in the United States, a big chunk of that is World War II. And even then, it's not, I wouldn't say it's very good at, I think like I wish we took a stronger approach, or a closer approach to Germany in terms of studying the Nazis. We kind of just learn Nazi bad. That's kind of it. And like, you know, obviously that is true, but you don't really learn what fascism is from a like academic level. You just kind of know that they're fascists and we are not fascists, allegedly. Yeah, not knowing some Americans. Yeah, yeah. People don't. It's hard to say you don't know something, because I think, especially doing this, there's sometimes an expectation to have an answer or know everything, because somebody will show up and go, haha, you don't even know this thing. And it's just, I don't know what I don't know. I didn't learn about the Tulsa Race Massacre until the Watchmen show came out. And like, that's really shitty. A lot of people didn't know that. And you know, you don't know stuff, you don't know stuff. I don't claim to be an expert on everything. But yeah.
Can possibly make an informed decision about who to vote for? Is their vote not uninformed almost by definition? For example, I don't speak one word of Slovenian. I couldn't name a Slovenian political party if my life depended on it. I don't understand anything about those local issues, their culture, or their...
Sorry, we have to go back just because I don't know what he's quite talking about. In Ireland, one of the things we had to learn was what made, let's say, communism and fascism as they were. Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah, like kind of all we learn is that like Nazis were fascists, Russians were communists, and that's kind of it. You kind of just learn the like, this side is made up of these people, but we're not really gonna like go into ideology. I'd be shocked, I don't know, but I'd be shocked if I even heard Karl Marx's name mentioned when covering World War II and like Russian history leading into the both world wars. I'd be surprised if I even I'd be surprised. Like, oh no, I actually remember this really, really vividly. In our textbooks, we had like a I remember we had a whole section on Russian history and shit. And there was, I shit you not, a blurb on the margins. It was maybe a paragraph long on Karl Marx, and that was it. That's all it was. It was one paragraph in the margins with a picture of Homeboy, but that was like it. And like, it didn't like, even though somebody whose ideas have lasted all the way up until now, and who like arguably has impacted like world thought like so much longer than some prominent members in Russian history. Like, it's just crazy how you don't even hear any of that shit. It's just nuts.
Of the host country can possibly make an informed decision about who to vote for.
Sorry, but have
is
you
their
seen
vote
the
not
video
uninformed almost by definition? For example, I don't speak one
remember we
word
watched
of
a bit of it, Jim.
Slovenian. I couldn't name a Slovenian political party if my life depended on it.
Okay,
At this
cool.
point, much bigger potential to sway the vote. The government's own civil servants expect 180,000 refugees to be here by the end of the year. Now,
yeah, which means they're not going to be voting. Like, there's only going to be a portion of that 55,000 that's going to be voting.
Now, at this point, one has to ask how an asylum seeker who isn't even able to speak the language of the host country can possibly make an informed decision about who to vote for.
They translate it. What's funny is like, yeah, all you would need to do is translate all the text and let them read it. They're fucking they can read. You just need to translate it to their language, and then they can figure it out.
Their vote not uninformed almost by definition. For example, I don't speak one word
uninformed.
of Slovenian. I couldn't.
Yes, and it's always the uninformed now will always be uninformed. It's not like they could, I don't know, learn a little bit. They could inform themselves, but to this person, it's not about to this guy Ben. It's not about that like any Slovenian, as an example, could ever learn Irish politics. It's that he doesn't want them involved in Irish politics. This is the kind of like obvious racism and weird xenophobia that you get from these kinds of guys, where it's like, oh yeah, if you're Slovenian and we translated all of our electoral what's the word information and like everything else, you still wouldn't get it. It's like, why wouldn't they get it? It's literally translated for them, that they can, that like once you translate it to the proper language, they have what you don't think they vote in their own country? They've never voted before? That's like not a concept they're familiar with? Like, no, it's ridiculous. The idea that like, oh well, how are they gonna make decisions on tax rates or tax changes? I think they know how numbers work. Like, the fuck?
Name a Slovenian political party if my life depended on it.
Yeah, maybe you should fucking learn, idiot.
About those local issues, their culture, or their history.
So should you be disallowed from voting?
Does anyone think that I'd be able to cast an informed vote on the issue of the day? Well, obviously not.
Well, the real question is, that the Slovenian government respect your ability to educate yourself? That's actually the real question. If the Slovenian government is like, we think that you can figure it out and you can learn and you should be able to still have a say since you live here. That's called, again, thriving democracy.
Irish voter wandering into a Slovenian election would be incredibly easy to manipulate because they wouldn't know any better than what the last political candidate had told them. You'd be voting blindly on things that you had absolutely no knowledge of and just hoping for the best. And that wouldn't be your fault, of course. Nobody expects you to be an expert in South Korean or Estonian politics.
Also, keep in mind how many Irish people are experts in Irish politics. Like, same with the US. There are so many people who don't vote and people who are, quite frankly, not, I don't think, like, knowledgeable enough to vote. But I would never support an effort to take away their suffrage. Like, that's kind of how democracy works. You get people who have a lot of it. Like, we have terms for this. It's called low information voters, especially here in the US. There are tons of low information voters. People back in 2004, I remember this. My mom wouldn't vote for John Kerry, the Democratic candidate for president in 2004, because he just looked weird. Like, to her, she was like, I don't know, he just gives me weird vibes. I just don't really like him very much. Even though, like, a vote for George Bush is a vote for a is a vote for an utter fucking moron, somebody who should have never ascended to the presidency, somebody who's utterly unprepared for any political office. But sometimes people just don't vote on information. They don't vote on logic. Sometimes people just vote on vibes, and like, we can absolutely accommodate that. It's called broad democracy. And also, that's, at the end of the day, the only free way for societies to actually choose their own path forward. Like, what you're asking for, or what you're arguing, is that somebody who's not knowledgeable or somebody of a certain knowledge threshold shouldn't be allowed to vote. And you know what that ends up turning into? You know which group of people, and I'll speak for the US, you know which group of people would fall under that knowledge threshold here in the United States? Republican Party voters. Republican Party voters would be the most harmed in something like this. And no doubt that this guy is somebody who would, if they were in America, vote for the Republican Party. At the end of the day, voter tests are only a threshold for the opposite group to those picking the questions. Meaning, if you would like to do this whole, you're too, you don't know enough. You don't know how this works enough. You don't do this, you don't do that. Well, guess what? When your opposition comes into power, say goodbye to your suffrage because you don't know enough. Because you're some dumb fuck Floridian voter that doesn't know, I don't fucking know, something. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Some random fact about governance. Because you don't know that, but somebody in New York might know it, or somewhere else. There goes your vote. No. None of this, it's nonsense. If you believe in democracy, you believe in all people having the right to vote. It's either everybody or nothing on democracy. And by the way, I feel the same way about prisoners. I support prisoner voting. I think those people are a part of the society, same with everybody else. They should be allowed to vote. Especially because if I remember, I'm trying to think, I'm pretty sure felons don't get to vote in certain states after they get out. The minute you're out, you should have all of your rights restored to you. Except for your ability to own firearms. That's one where we can't have that, sadly. But in terms of your suffrage, absolutely. Absolutely. Holy shit, turn out of 70-80%. That's crazy.
Politics.
For us, I think it's like somewhere in the 40s.
For not knowing those things. But it would mean that the government probably shouldn't be encouraging you to vote when you likely haven't got a clue what you're actually voting for. And yet apparently...
Also, I think the people who, I think Ukrainians or recent refugees should be able to make that decision for themselves.
The Irish government wants people
I think
from
they're
all
aware
over the world
of
who don't even speak English,
of whether they
Irish,
think they should
to
be
vote
voting
in their droves by the tens of thousands to decide the future fate of our local democracy. It is actual madness. But in fact, it's worse than madness, because madness implies that it's just senseless. So far as I'm concerned, this is also a cynical and Machiavellian ploy by the government to retain power under the guise of being inclusive, whatever that means. Because after all, just think about it. It's pretty logical to assume that many asylum seekers will feel indebted to the government, whether an individual is genuinely fleeing war.
10% lower than usual? I wonder why that was.
Or falsely claiming asylum just to improve their standing in life. Either way, the government has done those people a favor that they likely won't soon forget, because who gave them their brand new modular homes and luxurious hotel rooms? Well, the government did. And so who are these asylum seekers going to reward with their vote when the election comes around, most likely? Well, the government parties that have given them their new life, right? That's just common sense. And bear in mind that this is coming after all the backlash to open borders seen during the East Wall protests. So in effect, what the government has done here is import tens of thousands of likely voters as the governing parties consistently drop in the polls with native Irish citizens. They are bringing in a new electorate, knowing that many of those people will likely vote for the establishment and the status quo that has benefited them so much. It's outrageous. It's not the fault of refugees and asylum seekers that this is happening, of course. They didn't choose our ridiculous voting system. But this is a fundamentally anti-democratic sleight of hand by the government that should be...
Anti-democratic to let everybody vote. Crazy that, huh? It's... What's the thing? I always avoid using this because every time I say the word Orwellian, my brain just goes to Sarah Palin saying it. But that's basically what we're describing here. He's describing democracy as anti-democracy, because at the end of the day, he understands that proper democracy doesn't favor him and doesn't put him and his politics into power. What democracy does is actually work against this person. So when the government decides, hey, we're going to give more people suffrage, he goes, ooh, I don't know about that, Chief. If you give more people suffrage, that's not gonna, they're not gonna vote the way that I want them to vote, because I don't know why Southern either. Just go with it. But they're not gonna vote the same way that I do, and I think that's unfair. I think people should have to vote the way that I have that I vote if they come into the country more recently. It's just not fair to me to have more people vote, even though every single year more people vote because of people growing to be 18. So it's always like, what do you mean? There's always new people voting every single year. Why is this group somehow less eligible than other groups?
Be loudly called out and condemned for what it is, a self-serving power grab.
Deal with it.
Please like and share this video, and if you enjoyed it, please consider signing
And keep in mind, they need to do this whole thing of like, oh, it's a power grab, because they do this in the United States too. Oh, it's a power grab. Oh, the Democrats are buying voters. Well, no, actually, the Democrats, and in this case, the Irish government that is allowing people to vote once they're 18, regardless of their citizenship status. No, what they are doing is expanding suffrage to all people in the country. And what they are doing is good policy. You see, good policy leads to, shocker here, better performance politically. So, it's kind of just one of those things where it's like, unfortunately, this guy's racism and xenophobia is getting in the way of him being successful in politics. And he just doesn't really recognize that, which is funny, just in and of itself. But anyway, the thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to